said so.
William Cates.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow my next-door neighbour, the member for Sheffield Brightside and Hillsborough, and it was also a delight to hear the maiden speech of my honourable friend, the member for Hartlepool earlier. And as a fellow MP in a post-industrial area, I absolutely recognise what she said about the importance of levelling up being about restoring not just materially to northern areas the opportunities that have been given to the south, but also honouring those areas for the contribution they've made over the last hundreds of years to the wealth of this nation. Mr Deputy Speaker, throughout my whole adult life, inflation rates and interest rates have been remarkably stable. This is not normal historically, and when I speak to constituents or more senior members of this place and hear about what life was like in the 70s and, of course, for many decades before that, we realise that the inflation that is a threat now is very different to the stability that we have enjoyed in previous years. And it is a concern. My constituents are worried. They're worried about energy prices, and we've heard much about that over recent days. They're worried about commodity and construction prices and shortages. I've heard from a major importer in my constituency concerns about the cost of shipping. And a shipping container from China, the cost has risen from around $2,000 a container last November to getting on for $20,000 now. That will have huge inflationary pressure given how much we import. But it is also the case that wages are rising and our job market is buoyant. Our plan for jobs is working, and we've heard much about the furlough scheme that has absolutely rescued our economy from the fate of mass unemployment. We've got record numbers of job vacancies, over 1 million, and businesses in my constituency of Penistone and Stockbridge are hiring. They're hiring people of all ages for all different types of jobs. Now, we've heard Brexit blamed for some of the situation that we face, and there's no doubt that Brexit has caused changes in our economy. But I would like to draw honourable members' attention to an article in this week's Spectator by Matthew Lynn entitled "Who's Afraid of Rising Wages?" And the opening section says, during the Brexit referendum, Stuart Rose, the former boss of Marks and Spencer and chair of the Remain campaign, claimed that if Britain left the EU, wages will go up. This was, he added, in a rare moment of candour, not necessarily a good thing. But the idea that salaries might rise was exactly the reason that a great many people voted for Brexit. And of course, why should we be afraid of rising wages? It's what the opposition have been calling for many times. If there is more competition for employees, it will lead to rising wages. And we are seeing this. Costa paying more than 5% more. Wages have risen, on average, 8% over the last 3 months. And of course, this government is raising the national living wage already in April to £8.91. And we must remember that we are in an economic shock. We're coming out of an extraordinary economic time, and things will settle. And in fact, the IMF forecasts the UK to have the highest growth in the G7 this year. So whilst there are concerns, there absolutely are concerns around inflation and the cost of living that must be addressed, there's also a good chance that we will have a fairer jobs market at the end of this. I certainly will.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. I wonder if she could share with us her solutions for the seasonal agricultural workers scheme not being adequate enough to be able to enable farmers to employ enough people to pick crops in the field and to avoid the situation that we're seeing in Scotland, where many fields of crops are just having to be left rotting because of a lack of workers.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her intervention, and she makes an excellent point. And while overall, on a macro level, having more jobs available for more British workers will push wages up, it is of course the case that there are certain sectors which will need specific treatment and specific intervention to save those economic sectors, and I would support any measures in that. But whilst there are concerns that she has raised, and of course concerns in the wider economy, our plan for jobs is working, and I think the future is optimistic. But there are some long-term structural issues with the cost of living and threat to living standards that I think we must look at, that this is a moment to address, and we must find a solution for the sake of future generations. First of all, housing affordability is a key driver of problems with cost of living. It will unlock many issues if we solve the housing crisis. It will solve generational inequality and it will reduce the cost of living. And I'm delighted that my right honourable friend, the member for Surrey Heath, has been appointed to look at this specific problem because it is a very, very important issue. And many of the serious issues that members have raised in this House today would be much aided by a reduction in the cost of housing. We also need to look at fairer finance for families. And again, much has been said about the changes to universal credit, but I want to particularly look at what we could do in our taxation system to make life fairer and cheaper for families. Unlike in many countries, in the UK we have a very individualistic tax system. We tax individuals rather than households, and that means we don't take into account the number of dependents in a particular house, and it can make life very expensive for families. And actually, in some families on low and middle incomes, they can end up paying around 30% more tax than individuals living on their own. And then when we couple that with the way that benefits are clawed back as people earn more, some families can face effective marginal tax rate of 75%, making it very, very difficult to get out of poverty. And I think we have to recognise the importance of raising children for our whole society and not just for the nuclear family. And so we need to look at how we can make it less expensive for families to exist and to raise their children. I certainly will.
It's an interesting point that she's making about support for families, so I wonder if she would agree with me that the UK Government's two-child benefit cap punishes those that have larger family and puts them into a position where they cannot work their way out of poverty.
I thank the Honourable Lady for intervention, but I think what's far more significant is the way that we tax individuals rather than looking at household income and potentially spreading people's income tax allowance and things like that. That would give families far more choice about how they spend their income and how they wish to organise their lives and make family life much more affordable. Thirdly, we've got to address the long-term affordability of our public spending commitments. Of course, the welfare state that we have today was designed 80 years ago. Life was very, very different then. Demographics were different then. There was no paid-for childcare or paid-for social care. Most women didn't work. There was a huge amount of free care, free community living that was going on that we just don't have, or not nearly as much of today. And of course, people spent a far higher percentage of their life working. Whereas now people spend much longer in education and much, much longer in retirement, which means proportionally over the course of someone's life, they're spending far less time paying tax, paying for insurance, paying for the benefits that we all want to enjoy. So we can't carry on as we are, and the OBR forecasts that public sector net debt could rise to 300% of GDP by 2070. So we just can't continue with the way that we are now. We need a reset. We need to redesign our public spending and our welfare state for modern life and modern demographics. We can't tax our way out of this. I think we've already established that. Of course, we should be trying to grow our way out of it. Absolutely right. But we also need a fundamental redesign of the welfare state and of public spending. We need much more emphasis on community solutions. We need more emphasis on prevention. It's been an absolute honour to be part of my right honourable friend, the member for Northamptonshire South's early years review and her Start for Life recommendations, looking at how important those first 1,001 days are of a child's life. If we get that right, we prevent so many problems that destroy people's lives in future and are also incredibly expensive in terms of public spending. We must spend more money and more investment in early years and also on health prevention. I think around 40% of the NHS budget is spent on preventable and lifestyle diseases. We have to tackle these things if the state is going to be affordable in the long term. And of course, we should innovate, we should use technology, we should look at what other countries are doing in this area. So we should be concerned about the cost of living. And I know there are families up and down this country that are struggling, and there are families that aren't being able to take advantage of opportunities in jobs and higher wages. But this government has taken action. It's taken extraordinary action over the last 18 months on jobs, and that is bearing fruit. And now we have an important opportunity, as our economy is reset, to solve some of the structural issues that we face.
One of the things that Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. One of the things that I think the Government could look at is the 2017 plan to extend auto-enrolment to pensions to those 18 plus rather than 22 plus, and also low-paid workers. As part of a long-term solution, does the Honourable Lady agree with me that that's something the Government should take forward at the earliest opportunity?
Thank my honourable friend for that, and I absolutely agree. And in my speech in the debate on the National Insurance a couple of weeks ago, I made the point that the auto-enrolment scheme was a fantastic invention, and perhaps we should extend it, like you say, but also we could look at using it for a model to help contribute to social care in the future, so that people pay into it now and reap the rewards later on. So I absolutely agree with the point that he's made. But just to finish, we have to address some of these structural issues. Now is an excellent time to do that, and I would welcome working with ministers, with colleagues across the House, to look at innovative solutions on how we do that.